It all started in 1889 in Austria. Adolf clashed with his father, who wanted him to be a government clerk, but the kid had artistic vibes. He headed to Vienna, the world art capital, with a simple plan: get into the Academy of Fine Arts and become a star. But instead, the admission board rejected him twice. The academy's feedback was brutal. Your buildings are fine, but your people look like mannequins, so go and be an architect. But just a little problem. He did not have the diploma for that, so he spent the next few years living like starving artist life, sleeping in homeless shelters and selling postcards for pocket change. This is where he started talking about his wild political theories to anyone who'd listen. In 1913, he moved to Munich for a fresh start, and when World War I kicked off, he realized that this was his big break. He traded his paintbrush for a rifle and signed up for the army. While everyone else was miserable in the mud, Adolf was like a fish in water. He worked as a messenger, sprinting through gunfire to deliver notes between commanders. And over 4 years, he earned 2 Iron Crosses, a huge deal for a regular soldier. The war gave him what art never could: status and a sense of power. When Germany lost, he was in the hospital after a gas attack, totally devastated. Right then, he made a choice. If he could not be an artist, he'd be the guy who rewrites history. He went back to Munich and got a job as a spy. The army literally paid him to go undercover and check out new political parties. One day, Adolf went to spy on a tiny group called the German Workers' Party. Instead of just taking notes, he joined the debate and absolutely roasted his opponent. The crowd was so impressed that they invited him to join. He soon realized his superpower is his voice. He could keep people hooked in Munich's beer hall for hours. In 1923, he tried to seize power by force in the beer hall putsch, but it was an epic fail. He was arrested and his party was banned. But even in jail, he played his card right. His trial became a national sensation, and his prison time felt more like vacation. He spent his days taking visitors and dictating his book Mein Kampf, which would eventually make him a millionaire. After prison, Hitler flipped the script. No more coups, just free elections. He was the first politician to fly between cities, hitting 3 rallies a day. When the Great Depression hit, his promise of jobs for everyone went viral. By 1932, his party was the biggest in the game. Old school politicians thought that they could use him as a puppet, but they were dead wrong. In January 1933, he became chancellor and immediately started dismantling the system from the inside. He used a massive fire at the parliament building as an excuse to scrap civil rights. Then he passed a law to rule by decree, skipping parliament entirely. When the president died in 1934, Adolf just took over both jobs, called himself the Führer, and made the army swear on oath to him personally. In months, the democracy was gone. As the boss, Adolf decided the peace treaties were just scrap paper. He openly built a new air force and started a military draft, even though both were strictly banned. The world just watched. Then came his biggest bluff. In 1936, he marched troops into the Rhineland. His generals were terrified because the army was still weak, but nobody fired back. In 1938, he pulled off the Anschluss, taking over his native Austria while crowds cheered. Then, in the Munich Agreement, Britain and France basically handed him a piece of Czechoslovakia just to avoid war. Adolf realized that he could get away with anything by simply raising the stakes. The final move? A shock alliance with his enemy Stalin. This secret pact cleared the path for his big game. September 1st, 1939 was the point of no return. To avoid a two-front war, Adolf pulled off a shocker, a secret deal with his enemy Stalin to carve up Poland together. For the attack itself, he used a classic false flag move, SS officer dressed in Polish uniform to stage a fake raid on a German radio station. With his excuse ready, Adolf launched a full-scale invasion, debuting a brutal new tactic called Blitzkrieg, meaning lightning war. While German tanks smashed through from the west, the USSR struck from the east on September 17. Poland was crushed between two machines. This win convinced Adolf he was a genius, but in reality he had just sparked the biggest catastrophe in history. While the world expected a slow war, German tanks smashed through Europe in days. The spring of 1940 was a total shock. Denmark fell in hours, and France, the strongest army around, surrendered in just 6 weeks. Adolf went full petty mode, forcing the French to sign the papers in the exact same train car where Germany lost World War I. He was now the master of Western Europe. In June 1941, he made his biggest gamble, Operation Barbarossa. He attacked the Soviet Union, hoping for Blitzkrieg 2.0 to win before winter. At first, it looked like a walk in the park. His tanks trapped entire armies, and he was so confident that he started handing out jobs for the new territories he hadn't even fully conquered yet. Only Britain remained holding out on their land. But then Plan A hit a wall. First, the roads. What looked like highways on maps turned into impassable mud pits. Second, the Soviets didn't crumble. They moved their factories east and mobilized millions. By the time German soldiers could see Moscow through binoculars, the brutal winter struck. Adolf was so obsessed with a quick win that he forgot winter clothes for his soldiers. Soldiers wrapped themselves in newspapers to stay warm, and the oil in their tanks literally froze solid. Outside Moscow, the German war machine got its first real access the night of the war. In 1942, Adolf decided to attack the south for oil, focusing on Stalingrad. It turned into a brutal meat grinder with fighting for every single house. Adolf made it personal, publicly promising the city would fall. It was a fatal mistake. Soviet troops trapped the German army in a giant circle, and since Adolf refused to let them retreat, over 90,000 exhausted soldiers eventually surrendered. This was the breaking point. His invincible aura was officially gone. By 1944, things went from bad to critical. On D-Day, while the Allies were landing in Normandy, Adolf was actually asleep. His generals were too scared to wake him up, and because of clever misinformation, he kept his reserves in the wrong place. By the time he realized the scale of the attack, the defense was breached. Germany was caught in a destroyed between two fronts, and it was officially game over. There was even an assassination attempt. A group of his own generals tried to blow him up during a meeting, but he survived with just scratches and even more paranoia. He spent his final months underground in a bunker in Berlin. The scene was surreal. He was moving non-existent division on map and giving orders to armies that had already been wiped out. When Soviet tanks were just blocks away, Adolf finally admitted it was over, and on April 30, 1945, he committed suicide with his wife Eva Braun. The man, who started as homeless painter in Vienna and once held an entire continent in terror, ended his journey in the ruins of his capital. With his death, the Third Reich was vanished, putting a final dark period on his 20-year nightmare.